She's on mute.
You're muted.
All right, my kids are like constantly in here opening the fridge and doing, so I just kind of keep that on mute. So as you all probably know, Samantha was sending out a sheet or an email to give her 3 topics that you could speak on. So the first one that I'm actually going to do is about copywriting. So I put together, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And I put together this. I'll also, Sam, I'll give this to you after the call as well, so that you can post it if we're doing a project in teamwork or anything like that. So, okay, so when I put this together for today, I really used not just knowledge of really putting together Facebook ads, but also kind of the years I've spent working on commercials and different other forms of writing. So I think the basis of really writing any good Facebook ad is good writing, to start with. So I've kind of mixed all that in here. And if you have any questions, please stop me and I'll go through this pretty quickly. So, okay, so first thing to start with is, and many of you, if not all of you already know this, is that we only want one call to action per ad. So we're essentially telling the audience what to do. So we don't want to overly complicate the copy with multiple messaging. So we need to think about one ad to one message. The other thing I typically do is get the pain point right off the top. So whenever I'm reading anything, I always ask myself, when I'm rereading my copy, okay, why should I care about this? So if I was just an average audience reading or scrolling through Facebook and I came across this ad, what's really going to grab me? So I really try and hit the pain point. So these are just 3 examples of that. So always wanted to write a book, but have no idea where to start, asking a question off the top, grabbing a group pain point that someone can personally identify with, or some kind of headline. Anxiety and depression are no strangers to our current world crisis. So someone can read that and think, oh yeah, I can relate to that, but I also know it's a bigger issue right now. And then urgency, creating some kind of urgency, like there's still time to enroll, but hurry, registration is closing. So that would be your first thing, is your problem, pain point, question, or headline, something to grab someone's attention off the top. Then you give the answer. Then you say, okay, well, this is the answer to your question or problem or pain point, and then explain briefly why you're the one, or your client is the one to solve it, especially if the audience is cold or unfamiliar. I know we've had this with a lot of our clients who may not be as well known. And then you give the product or the solution. In this piece right here, that is not necessary when you're dealing with a warm audience. You might need 1 sentence just to say who they are, but typically you wouldn't. So in terms of the actual copy, that was more about structure. One of the biggest parts I feel of any writer's job, whether you're doing a Facebook ad or anything for a client, is really getting familiar with their voice. It's your job to take their voice and make it saleable, but you really do need to start with their voice. So I think a huge part of my job is the research. So when I have a new client or someone I'm not familiar with, I go through and I read their website. I always typically sign up for their email list so that I get those autoresponders right away, and I can just get a feel for how their marketing department or how they write. And those are just some of the ways that I find them, as website, videos, Amazon, YouTube. And then the other thing I do is I'm scrolling through their Facebook page or their website, is I kind of cut and paste words or phrases that I see used time and time again, because it's their vernacular and it really gives more of a flavor for them. And I think clients really like to see that we're paying attention to how they're saying what they say. I think that's really important. Writing with a 5th grade vocabulary, I know we've talked about this actually on this call before, which isn't talking down. It's really just simplifying the language so that anyone can really understand. My secret weapon as a writer is a thesaurus. I know that sounds super basic, but it's something I have, like, if I could have it on autopilot, I would, but I'm constantly looking up words on the doc, when you click and then the lookup or the synonyms or any of that comes up. I use that constantly when I'm writing. it's just one way of finding the best word possible. And especially when you've got a client that really specializes in one thing, you find yourself repeating the same words over and over. So I think it's a really good way to mix that up. Testimonials are also something I love to use when it's applicable. It keeps you from kind of overselling, and it lets somebody else do that for you. This is something that I know advertisers, copywriters, all of us really are aware of all the time, is that we've got so many different audiences and targets and ad sets that we're dealing with. And it's really important to customize for those different groups, especially if you've got someone who's, say, has a business-minded ad set, and then you've got someone who's our woo-woo spiritual ad set. You would speak to those completely differently. So for example, if we're uploading, a client's email list and they're a thought leader or speaker, this is just some examples of who they might have on their list. They might have a segment of past conference attendees, coaches, which then can be further broken down into business, executive, leadership, relationship, life. They might have personal clients. They might have other aspiring authors, speakers, or teachers that are maybe even in a teacher training program with them. Or they could have, affiliate leads that could be completely different than their normal audience. So those are just some considerations to look at. My cardinal rule for writing anything is that, this is kind of my mantra, is that every single word in what you write has to have a job, meaning that you have to ruthlessly edit everything that you do. And actually, it was funny when I was just reviewing this, I'll show you. In this line right here, something I might have done, which I do a lot, is I always read things out loud. So always wanted to write a book, but have no idea where to start. This actually would have worked without the word have. You could say, I always wanted to write a book, but no idea where to start. And those are the kind of words I go back and cut constantly in my copy.
And can I just add to that, why that's so important, especially with Facebook advertising, is because we only have those 1 or 2 lines to catch people's attention. So like doing that editing and really like getting out those useless words is so very, very important now, because we only have like 2 lines to really bring them in. So yeah.
Exactly. Totally.
Question
Sure.
on that subject. I think I might overuse commas. Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, actually, in the next section, I actually talk about that, because I think that it's a great question. I think that Facebook ads, especially, in the writing genre, you have to see, what does it look like visually? And I think that's a combination of the spacing in between the lines, the emojis that you use. Actually here, I'll just jump ahead to answer your question. Right here. So punctuation, you have to know the rules to break them. And so you have to look at your ad and say, how do dashes look? Like, I write with dashes a lot, but sometimes they look terrible in a Facebook ad, or they make it look disjointed. So I think after you get through the copy, you read it out loud, you make sure it makes sense. You have to look at it visually, semicolons, commas, dashes, all those kind of things that could just almost be a break in the reader's flow. So a lot of times I won't use a period, sometimes in a headline, because I think it kind of gobs it up. It just kind of stops someone where you don't want them to stop. So yeah, that's a great question. It's really visually. And you know what? Most people overuse commas, and there's actually, I've noticed a real trend, especially in copywriting, less is more, especially lately. I think in school we were all taught where, always use commas in certain places, and it's not so much the rule anymore. So,
thank you.
Sure. No, thank you. So this just is kind of a quick recap of what we were just talking about, is lists and bullets. Anything you can do to get the reader's eye from the top to the bottom of the ad without breaking up their read, the better. Creating spacing in between important thoughts. Caps, those are another one. Those are great to use sparingly, but when you start using them too much, your ad gets aggressive. Same notes for the exclamation points. Very sparingly, they work really well, but if they're all over the place, people are going to think you're overly salesy, aggressive, and they may just stop reading. Emojis and symbols, I love to a further break in between important thoughts. Punctuation, we just reviewed. So just the last little thought that I have is that I've always believed, in writing for clients, that you're the caregiver, and it's your job to make the client's material the absolute best and saleable it can be. But at the end of the day, it's their product, it's their voice. So it's our job to steer them and guide them and tell them what we know is going to work best. But sometimes you have to yield when you really would rather not. And you have to know when to kind of give and take on that. But again, it's our responsibility to guide them as best we can to make sure we're putting their best foot forward. So the final thing, I wanted to just recommend this book. It's my absolute favorite book. I know it's weird that a writing book is my favorite book, but this book, and I have it actually right here. It's 30 years old plus. I mean, the gentleman who wrote it's passed on a while ago, but it's called The Classic Guide for Writing Nonfiction. So it's really a lot, of just stylistic tips and ways to think about your writing in a no-nonsense way, which I really, really love, which I think is what Facebook writing is really all about, is getting your message out quickly and clearly and effectively. So, okay. I think I'm finished. So I will send this to Samantha, and I hope that was maybe helpful or provided, some insight. I know all of us are in this field, but I hope there were a couple nuggets in there you might be able to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.